This is our desert bag that we use when we do our godly place stories, and we love using it. It gives a snapshot of what the desert looks like. The desert is a dangerous place, and the wind blows the sand, and it's changing all the time. It's hot in the daytime and cool at night. You don't really want to be going into the desert unless you really have to. And a lot of the stories of the people of God happened in the desert. So this morning we're thinking about waiting, we're thinking about hope in this season of Advent. Put some of our wooden characters in the desert. Perhaps we might think of ourselves as one of these people. When I think of Advent, I think of hope and waiting. And there's a great line in the film Shawshank Redemption. Hope is a good thing, may be the best of things, and no good thing ever dies. I don't know how you hold on to hope, especially in these times. Terry Waite, you might remember, some of you, was held captive as a hostage many years ago. And he said this: "You can take my freedom, you can disconnect me from the outside world, but you cannot destroy my soul." And he held on to hope. Advent is about waiting and hoping. And all of us have been called to spend more time waiting than we ever would have imagined this year. But we're not alone, and our faith story can give us some encouragement. The children of Israel were caught as slaves in Egypt for an impossible length of time. They were looking for freedom, but they had to wait for it to happen. And then there's Moses, who did lead the people out of Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea and came into the desert, where they thought they might be there just for a short while. It turns out they were there for 40 years. And then we can go forward into the faith story, to the people in exile in Babylon. And this is where our verse from Lamentations comes from. Waiting patiently for the salvation of God. The people have been taken out of their homeland, and now they are far away from home. Another part of the story of God and his people where they wait. And so we wait today. We hear these words in Lamentations verse 26 in chapter 3. It's good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Our culture is not really geared up for waiting. We don't like to sit around doing nothing. But waiting is not about doing nothing. Sometimes it's about positive action, preparing us for a right choice in the future, tuning us in to God's timing and God's perfect plan. We've been thinking about Ecclesiastes in the last few weeks, and it says in there is an appointed time for everything. Time for God to come. It's not wasted time as we sit and wait. It brings our restless hearts into a conformity with God's bigger plan. Whatever technology has done to our culture, the ways of God has not changed. The words of the psalmist still ring very true. Be still and know that I am God. Advent tells us to be still, to watch and wait for God to come. And so Advent is a waiting place, preparing us for God's greatest event. It's like the hush in a theatre just before the curtain rises. The word Advent means coming, and the promise of what Advent is going to bring is an unimaginable invasion. God's gift to us in the birth of a child. God's second coming in Christ to fulfill all things. Waiting through a cold winter doesn't prevent the necessary activity of growth under the soil. The roots of the trees and the shrubs and the bulbs are all busy emerging. Waiting through a pregnancy just heightens the preparation for a child to be born. Everything worthwhile needs incubation. Nothing worthwhile comes without preparation. Nothing happens without a waiting place. When God promises us something, do we wait patiently? Or do we become disappointed when waiting is taking longer than we first imagined? I'm sure many of us this year have felt that. In Psalm 27, wait for the Lord and be strong. Let your heart take courage and wait for the Lord. So here we are today in the second week of Advent, waiting expectantly, waiting with courage, trying to choose to push aside the doubts and disappointments that we perhaps feel, and trying to hold on to God's faithfulness, trusting that God will come through for us at the right time and in the right place. And so we journey on towards the manger, towards the celebration of the birth of Jesus, God coming in human form to us. The waiting place changes us. Before the waiting place, Israel saw Babylon as a problem, but during the waiting time, they saw that they were the problem and Babylon was their setting. Waiting changes our hearts and confirms that we can do nothing but get ready. The initiative is always in God's hands. And so today, as we sit and wait patiently for the salvation of God, we hold on to his promise that he will come, and we trust in his enduring faithfulness.